Ethan Carter had always believed in love at first sight. At 32, he had built a successful career as a financial analyst in Chicago. He was charming, well-mannered, and known for his infectious laughter. But beneath his confident exterior was a longing. He wanted to find the one. For years, Ethan had watched his friends settle down, start families, and build futures with their partners. His past relationships had never lasted. Either the chemistry fizzled out, or he found himself with women who didn't share his vision of love. Just when he was beginning to think true love wasn't in the cards for him, he met Isabella Rose. She was breathtaking, and a voice that could melt hearts. They met on a dating app, but their first real conversation felt like something out of a movie. She was well-spoken, sophisticated, and had an air of mystery that intrigued him. She told him she was an independent consultant and had traveled the world. Unlike the women he had dated before, Isabella wasn't easily impressed by money or status. She challenged him, made him laugh, and left him wanting more after every conversation. Their first date was at an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago. Over candlelight and a bottle of Merlot, they talked for hours. Isabella listened intently as Ethan shared stories from his childhood, his dreams, and his struggles. In return, she spoke about her love for art, her travels across Europe, and the belief that love should be boundless and unconditional. Ethan was captivated. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Romantic weekend getaways, late-night calls, and passionate encounters filled their lives. It was a whirlwind romance, intense, thrilling, and intoxicating. Then, 6 months into their relationship, Ethan proposed. It was under the dazzling lights of the Eiffel Tower, during a surprise trip he had planned just for the two of them. As they stood in the chilly Parisian night, he pulled out a velvet box, revealing a diamond ring. "Marry me, Isabella," he whispered. Tears welled up in her eyes. She hesitated for just a moment, just long enough for Ethan to notice, but then she smiled and nodded. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times, yes. That night, they celebrated with champagne, laughter, and whispered promises of forever. Ethan was convinced he had found his soulmate. But what he didn't know was that Isabella carried a secret, one she had carefully hidden, fearing it would shatter everything. A secret that, in just a few weeks, would turn their dream honeymoon into a nightmare. The honeymoon was supposed to be the beginning of their forever. Ethan and Isabella arrived in Bali just 2 days after their wedding, checking into a luxurious private villa overlooking the turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean. The villa had everything: a sprawling infinity pool, a secluded beach, and candlelit terraces perfect for romantic dinners. Ethan had spared no expense. He wanted this to be the perfect start to their marriage. The first few days were magical. They lounged on the beach, explored ancient temples, and indulged in decadent meals under the stars. Ethan had never been happier. Isabella seemed radiant too, until their third night. Something had changed. That evening, after returning from a sunset cruise, Isabella was unusually quiet. As they lay together in bed, Ethan noticed how tense she was. She avoided his gaze, her fingers gripping the sheets tightly. "What's wrong?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She swallowed hard. "There's something I need to tell you." Ethan sat up, concern washing over him. "What is it?" Isabella hesitated, staring at the moonlight streaming through the open balcony doors. Then, with a deep breath, she said the words that would change everything. "I was born male." Silence. Ethan blinked, his mind struggling to process the words. He felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "What?" "My name was Isaac. I transitioned years ago. I had the surgery, changed my documents. I've been living as Isabella ever since. You're the first man I've truly loved, and I was afraid that if I told you, I'd lose you, Her voice trembled. "Please, Ethan. I never meant to lie to you. I just wanted a chance to be happy." Ethan felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. His chest tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head in disbelief. Why didn't you tell me before?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "I was scared," she admitted. "I wanted to tell you, but every time I tried, I saw how much you loved me, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." Ethan swung his legs over the edge of the bed, his back to her. His mind was racing. The woman he had married, the woman he had given his heart to, had been hiding something this massive from him. "You should have told me before we got married," he muttered. "I know," Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. "But please, Ethan, I'm still the same person. I love you. That hasn't changed." Ethan didn't know what to say. His emotions swirled between anger, confusion, and betrayal. He needed air. Without another word, he stood up, grabbed his wallet, and walked out of the villa. Ethan wandered along the moonlit beach, the waves crashing at his feet. He downed shot after shot of whiskey at a nearby beach bar, trying to make sense of it all. Did he still love Isabella? Had everything between them been real? Part of him felt deceived, but another part of him remembered the moments they had shared, the laughter, the passion, the way she looked at him with nothing but love. As the alcohol burned in his stomach, Ethan realized he couldn't just walk away from this. He needed to talk to her. He stumbled back to the villa, his heart pounding. But when he stepped inside, the air was thick with tension. Isabella was standing near the bed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She turned to him, hopeful. "Ethan, I need time," he cut her off. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I understand." Ethan lay down, his back turned to her. Sleep didn't come easy. His thoughts tormented him, looping in an endless cycle of doubt and heartbreak. Neither of them knew that in less than 48 hours, one of them would be dead. The night was still, the ocean breeze barely rustling the curtains of Villa 309. The honeymoon suite, once filled with laughter and love, now felt cold, suffocating. Ethan had barely spoken to Isabella since she revealed her secret. He spent most of the day wandering around the resort, avoiding her, drinking at the poolside bar. Isabella, on the other hand, remained locked inside the villa, drowning in her own tears, replaying their argument over and over. That evening, after a tense dinner in silence, Ethan finally spoke. "I'm trying, Isabella," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I need to be alone tonight." Isabella's face fell, but she nodded. "Take all the time you need," she whispered. Ethan left, walking out into the humid Bali night. He needed clarity. He needed space. That was the last time Isabella saw him alive. At 3:17 a.m., a piercing scream shattered the silence of the resort. It was coming from Villa 309. Hotel security arrived within minutes, their radios buzzing with urgency. As they burst into the villa, they were met with a scene of pure horror. Ethan Carter lay sprawled on the bedroom floor, his white linen shirt soaked in blood. His body was motionless, his face frozen in shock. A deep wound gaped in his chest, the knife still lodged in his flesh. Isabella knelt beside him, her silk nightgown stained crimson, her hands trembling as she clutched his lifeless body. Her screams echoed through the room. The guards hesitated for a moment before one of them rushed forward. "Ma'am, step back." Isabella looked up at them, her eyes wild with terror. I didn't do this," she sobbed. "I woke up and he was already like this." One of the security officers grabbed her arms, pulling her away. "Call the police," he barked into his radio. The murder weapon, a sleek kitchen knife from the villa's kitchenette, lay beside Ethan. The blade was smeared with blood. The villa's doors were locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry. To the officers, there was only one possible suspect: Isabella. By sunrise, the villa had transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape lined the doorway as forensic teams combed through every inch of the suite. Police questioned the hotel staff, searching for any sign of an intruder. But all the evidence pointed to Isabella. The only fingerprints on the knife were hers. There were no signs of a struggle. The front door had been locked from the inside, meaning no one else could have entered or exited without a key. Isabella was taken into custody, her wrists bound in cold metal handcuffs. As she was led away, she kept repeating the same words. "I didn't kill him. I didn't kill him. But if she didn't, then who did?" The investigation was just beginning, and the deeper the police dug, the more twisted the truth became. The Bali police wasted no time launching their investigation. With Ethan Carter's body now at the morgue, forensic teams combed through Villa 309, searching for anything that might explain what had happened that fateful night. Isabella Rose sat in an interrogation room at the local police station, her wrists still red from the handcuffs. She was shaken, exhausted, and in complete disbelief. The man she had loved, her husband, was gone, and now everyone thought she had murdered him. But as investigators dug deeper into their past, they realized that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Detectives combed through Ethan's phone and emails, looking for clues. They discovered something chilling. Just hours before his death, Ethan had been texting a close friend back in Chicago. In the messages, Ethan expressed doubt and anger about Isabella's revelation. One message, sent around 11:45 p.m., read, "I don't know what to do, man. I feel like I married a stranger." Another message, sent just before midnight, said, "I need out of this. I don't think I can do this anymore." Had Ethan decided to leave Isabella? Had their argument escalated into something violent? But there was something else, a missing piece that didn't add up. While investigating Ethan's bank records, detectives found a suspicious withdrawal. $20,000 had been transferred from Ethan's personal account to an unknown offshore account just 2 days before the wedding. Who had access to Ethan's money? And why would he transfer such a large sum right before marrying Isabella? The deeper police looked, the more they began to suspect that this wasn't just a crime of passion. It might have been premeditated. Investigators turned their focus on Isabella, trying to piece together her past before she met Ethan. Her official records showed that she had transitioned nearly 6 years ago and legally changed her name to Isabella Rose. But before that, there were gaps. Police found no known family members. She had no listed parents or siblings. A history of changing addresses, moving between different cities every few months before settling in Chicago. An old police report from New York, where a man had accused her of fraud. The case was eventually dropped, but it raised suspicions. Was Isabella running from something? Had she manipulated Ethan for financial gain? Or was she truly innocent, trapped in a nightmare she never saw coming? Just when detectives were ready to charge Isabella, a hotel employee came forward with shocking new information. A bartender at the resort claimed that he saw Ethan arguing with another man earlier that night. The man was tall, muscular, and had a foreign accent. The argument became heated, with Ethan raising his voice. The bartender said he overheard Ethan saying, "Stay away from my wife." Who was this mystery man? And could he have been involved in Ethan's murder? With this new lead, detectives realized that Isabella might not be the only suspect. Someone else had a reason to want Ethan dead. And the truth was far darker than anyone had imagined. The murder of Ethan Carter quickly became an international media sensation. Headlines labeled it the honeymoon murder, with tabloids sensationalizing every aspect of the case. The fact that Isabella was a transgender woman only added fuel to the public's obsession, sparking heated debates online. Some defended her, claiming she was being framed due to prejudice, while others were convinced she had manipulated and murdered Ethan in cold blood. Despite the rumors, the Bali authorities moved swiftly, charging Isabella Rose with first-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Her fingerprints were found on the murder weapon. The villa's doors were locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry. Ethan had expressed doubts about their marriage just hours before his death. Isabella's legal team insisted she was innocent, arguing that the police had ignored other possible suspects. They pointed to the mysterious $20,000 transaction and the bartender's statement about a third man. But without concrete evidence to back up these claims, the prosecution remained confident that Isabella had killed her husband. The trial was set. The world watched as the fate of Isabella Rose unfolded in a foreign courtroom. The courtroom in Denpasar, Bali, was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters and spectators filled the benches, eager to witness the scandalous case firsthand. The prosecution painted Isabella as a deceptive woman with a hidden motive, suggesting she lured Ethan into marriage for financial gain. They claimed that when he confronted her about her past, she snapped and killed him in a fit of rage. Their star witness was a forensic expert who testified that the murder weapon, a kitchen knife from the villa, had only Isabella's fingerprints. They also pointed to traces of Ethan's blood on her nightgown, suggesting she had stabbed him at close range. When Isabella took the stand, her voice trembled. "I loved Ethan," she said. "I would never hurt him." She maintained her innocence, claiming she had woken up to find Ethan already dead. But when asked why she didn't call for help immediately, her explanation was weak. "I was in shock," she said. I couldn't move." Her defense team fought hard to introduce reasonable doubt. They argued, if Isabella had planned to kill Ethan, why use a knife from their own villa? Why would she lock herself inside the room with the body instead of staging the scene? Who was the mystery man Ethan argued with at the bar? But the judge and jury were not convinced. After 3 weeks of trial, the verdict was announced. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Guilty. Isabella Rose was sentenced to life in prison in Bali, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Gasps filled the room. Some spectators whispered, while others nodded in agreement. Isabella collapsed in tears as the guards escorted her away. Justice had been served. Or had it? 6 months after Isabella's conviction, a stunning revelation shook the case wide open. A local fisherman came forward with a story that changed everything. He told police that on the night of the murder, he had been walking near the resort when he saw a man fleeing the villa. The man was tall, muscular, and had a foreign accent. The fisherman had assumed it was just another tourist, until he saw the news about the trial. With this new testimony, detectives reopened the case and re-examined the evidence. What they found proved Isabella's innocence. The real killer had left behind a crucial piece of evidence that was overlooked: a partial fingerprint on the villa's sliding glass door. The print was tested and matched to a man named Luka Petrov, a Serbian national with a criminal record for fraud and extortion. Investigators discovered that Luka had connections to Ethan Carter. The missing $20,000 transaction was traced back to an offshore account linked to Luka. Turned out that Ethan had been blackmailed. Luka Petrov had known about Isabella's past before she told Ethan. He had threatened to expose her unless Ethan paid him to keep quiet. Ethan, furious and desperate, refused to be extorted. That's when Luka followed him to Bali and confronted him at the resort bar. The bartender had witnessed the argument, but no one had connected Luka to the crime, until now. Security footage from a nearby villa confirmed that Luka had entered the resort on the night of the murder. He had waited until Ethan returned to the villa, then slipped inside through the unlocked glass doors while Isabella was asleep. Luca stabbed Ethan in the chest, staged the scene to frame Isabella, and escaped unnoticed. When this evidence was presented in court, Isabella's conviction was overturned. After spending nearly a year in prison for a crime she didn't commit, she was finally exonerated. Isabella returned to the U.S. a free woman, but she was never the same. The ordeal had destroyed her reputation, her mental health, and the life she had built with Ethan. Luka Petrov was eventually arrested in Thailand and extradited to Indonesia, where he was sentenced to death by firing squad. But for Isabella, no amount of justice could undo what had happened. She had found love, only to lose it in the most tragic way possible. And though she was innocent, the world would never forget her name.